Imagine such a king mentioned in the noble Quran that he has a treasure that you can lose your mind when you think about it. Did you think I was exaggerating? When you put together the keys to the rooms where their treasures were found, it took 300 mules just to carry these keys decently. Imagine the rest. I'm talking about King Karun. He was waiting for such an exemplary end that you will be amazed when you hear what happened to him. The story of the treasure left over from 2,500 years ago to the present day may give you chills. Now hold on tight. Part of the treasure was found underground by villagers in an area close to Izmir. But no one knew that whoever laid hands on the treasure, disasters would not let him get away with it. If you are ready to listen to the story of Karun, which is of great interest to everyone who is watching this video on the screen right now, let's start. King Karun, the second richest king in the world ever. Of course, the prophet Solomon takes the first place, but if we take into account the difference of the period in which he lived, Karun was the richest in the world during his time. So much so that thousands of years later, even today, when we talk about wealth, we use the word that he was as rich as Karun. And we are not wrong in saying this, because it is narrated that Karun, who was a very poor person before becoming the richest in the world, was a relative of the prophet Moses. The prophet was very close to Moses. In fact, he was so close that the prophet Moses was instrumental in completely changing his life. Karun was close to Pharaoh and served him during the time of poverty. Pharaoh's wealth dazzled his eyes with what they had. Karun, who one day told Hazrat Musa alayhi salam that he wanted to become very rich, "Please help me. You are close to Allah." He said, "Pray that I will become rich." The prophet Moses was not so sure about this. But Karun was no longer working on behalf of the Pharaoh and was no longer persecuting the people under the Pharaoh's administration. The prophet Moses did not leave the prophet's side. Karun believed in him and did not go out of his word. He said, "What if again? Help me to become rich. We do good with what we earn, we spend it for good." Thus, we managed to receive the prayer of the prophet Moses, Harun. After that, he was taught the science of alchemy by Allah through the prayer of the prophet Moses. Thus, he learned the science of obtaining gold, diamonds, rubies, jewels, everything. He began to get rich at a great pace, adding wealth to his wealth. By the time he was 35, he had become the king of the country. Everyone was talking about him. In a short time, he had reached such a wealth that he had even taken many surrounding kingdoms under his protection. He was in such abundance that he covered everything he owned with gold, emeralds and various kinds of jewelry, from the costume of his horses to his cars, even to the clothes he wore himself. Gradually, he began to value only what was his own, and turned into a horny king. Not even the slightest crumb of the promises he made to the prophet Moses remained in his mind. What he had was the treasure he had. At night, when all the people were asleep, they used to visit the rooms where their treasures were located, watch their gold and jewelry. The sounds of walking on the gold were the most beautiful sounds that came to their ears. Now there were so many chests from these rooms full of treasures that 300 mules were used to carry all the keys. Even the human mind understands what a treasure it is. Karun, who used to be a poor and insignificant person in his eyes who worked for the Pharaoh, had now become one of the Pharaoh's favorite men. Pharaoh's confidant had become his best friend, and Karun became almost like an enemy to the prophet Moses. He spent all his time with his gold and with Pharaoh. The prophet Moses warned him a lot not to trust his property so much. God can take back all that he has from you, just as he has given you all that he has. But Karun Hazrat did not listen to Moses. What do you mean, God gave it? I have earned so much property thanks to my own scientific efforts. He said that I did it. It goes like this in the noble Quran. Karun was one of the people of Moses, but he transgressed against them. And we had given him such treasures that it was difficult for a strong, powerful people to carry their keys, and his people had said to him, "Do not be wayward, know that Allah does not like the wayward." The prophet Moses asked him to give zakat of his wealth, that is, to share a certain proportion of what he had with those who needed help. This was the last straw for Karun, and he thought that he should get rid of Hazrat Musa now. He decided to set a trap for her. He should have done such a thing that he should have turned away people who believed in the prophet Moses from him. He immediately went to Pharaoh and told him the plan of how they could get rid of Moses. According to the plan, he was going to talk to one of the most famous prostitutes in Egypt and convince her to play a game against Moses. Pharaoh knew such a woman. There was nothing this woman wouldn't do for money. According to the plan, when all the people gathered in the square on the feast day, they would take the woman out and make her throw for Hazrat Musa. The woman was going to say in front of everyone that she had committed adultery with the prophet Moses. Karun found the woman and told her about the plan. He said that if she accepted his offer, he would reward her with her weight in gold. The woman replied that it was a very simple task for me. And the king accepted Karun's offer. When the feast day comes, the whole city is gathered in the square. There is almost a festive atmosphere. Pharaoh also invited the prophet Moses to this event. The prophet Moses accepted this invitation, unaware of what would happen to him a little later, and it happened that day. Everyone is waiting ready to carry out the plan. Pharaoh invites Hazrat Musa alayhi salam to the square with great excitement, to the point where everyone can see. And he says to him in front of all the people, "Welcome, O Moses. I have a question for you. Is adultery forbidden in your religion?" Prophet Moses answers without thinking at all. He says it is absolutely forbidden. And if even the prophet Moses did this, is it still haram?
He asks. The prophet Moses replies that yes, of course, it is haram, and Pharaoh calls out to the woman waiting in the back and come out to us.
Tell him. He'll tell everyone what's going on. Tell me so that everyone can hear. That you committed adultery with Moses. The prophet Moses did not even look at the woman. He raises his stick in the air and raises his voice like this. "O woman, tell the truth. Just tell the truth. Have I committed adultery with you?" Everyone's eyes and ears were on the woman. Pharaoh and Karun were waiting with great excitement and pleasure for what would come out between the two lips of the woman. But whatever happened at that moment, the woman, who had nothing that she would not do for money and who had a very simple job for herself, completely changed the moment she saw the prophet Moses. First he swallowed first, took a deep breath and said this. "O Moses, I swear by Allah that you have not committed adultery with me." When Karun and Pharaoh heard this, they were left in amazement. And the people who bear witness to one thing cry out that we believe in the Lord of Moses. And they are all with the prophet Moses now. This incident would be the beginning of the end for Karun. The prophet Moses commands the earth to swallow the Karun and says, and Allah commands the earth to listen to Moses. So a miracle takes place before everyone's eyes, and the earth begins to split. First, the place swallows all of Karun's treasure, and then the king takes Karun into it. Karun went under the ground up to his throat. What happens if you stretch out your hand and say, Moses, save me? He is begging for forgiveness, but the prophet Moses does not listen to him. Thus, the richest miserly king of the world, along with his unique treasure, the ground split open and entered it and disappeared from sight. Surah al-Qasas in the noble Quran says in 81-82 that at the end we destroyed him and his house and his bark to the bottom of the earth. He no longer had men to help him against Allah, nor was he in a position to save himself. Those who wanted to be in his place only yesterday, woe to us this time. It means that Allah gives sustenance in abundance to whomever He wills of His servants, and in moderation to whomever He wills. If Allah had not been gracious to us, He would have surely caused us to be swallowed up in the earth.
There are many lessons to be learned from Karun's story. Do not be afraid to share some of your wealth and money from giving zakat with others who need help. So, what happened to King Karun's treasure trove of legends in those languages? Such a discovery has been made over all these thousands of years that you will be very surprised when you hear about what happened in Izmir in the year 1968. In a village located on the Uzak Road in Izmir, a man with a treasure map in his hand took 5 villages with him and started digging the place he described, and right at the excavated place, they reached a treasure consisting of 520 pieces of jewelry in a tomb. This treasure consisted of the jewels left to the princess by the Lydian king Karun, so it was only a tiny part of the great treasure that went to the bottom of the earth, which was inconceivable and secret, that the princess owned. The villagers, who sold this priceless treasure for only 78,000 TL with the money of that time, were happy that we had made money, but they were unaware of a rumor that had come down to our day that was circulating from tongue to tongue. And that is the possibility that Karun's treasure is talismanic. The treasure was completely smuggled to America. Then the villagers who took out the treasure began to lose their lives one after another in an interesting way. Some were left under the tractor, some became blind, and some lost their minds. Also, the treasury was not useful to those involved in the business in America. They also lost their lives one by one. After many years had passed, Karun's treasure, which was exhibited at the Metropolitan Museum of New York, attracted attention, and it was realized that it had been smuggled from Turkey. After a legal process that lasted for many years, Turkey, which incurred $40 million in costs, managed to get the treasure back to our country by winning the case. Here is a tiny piece of King Karun's treasure left over 2,500 years ago, which is still on display in the Uzak Museum today. But years after the treasure was brought to the museum, it was realized that the winged seahorse, the most important piece, had long ago been replaced by a fake. Despite all the cameras and security, this piece, the original of which was stolen from the museum, turned up in Germany a long time later and was brought back to the Butler Museum again. If you happen to fall in the way of Uzak, Don't forget to visit Karun's treasure. But just in case, don't get too close to the treasure. Let me tell you from me, as the Prophet Muhammad said, love for the worldly goods is the veil between you and Allah. It is also in our hands to open that curtain. Of course, we will benefit from these blessings and these beauties that Allah has given to us. But remember that when you have the worldly goods in your hands, your enemies will always be your friends. And when you have nothing left, even your friend becomes an enemy, so it's always worth remembering at the end of the day. This world is like the stomach of an African child. Empty.